The conference room floated in the darkness of space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the cold vacuum. Inside, 12 species gathered around a circular table, each one representing an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Ambassador Velthar adjusted his forearms nervously as he took his seat. His insect-like eyes scanned the room, taking in the assembled powers. This was the most important meeting in recent history. At the center of discussion was humanity. The strange two-legged species from a small blue planet they called Earth. They had been discovered only 50 years ago, practically yesterday in galactic terms. Since then, they had been spreading quietly through unclaimed systems, building colonies, establishing trade routes. Nothing aggressive, nothing threatening, just steady, constant growth. That growth had finally touched borders that other empires claimed, and the other empires were not pleased. Velthar watched as the sole human representative entered the room. Captain Jin Wu walked with a steady gait, his face calm and weathered like old leather. He wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decoration. Compared to the elaborate robes and armor of the other delegates, he looked almost plain, unimportant. That was probably intentional, Velthar thought. High Commander Thralix of the Vryn Empire stood as Jin Wu took his seat. Thralix was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in scales that gleamed like polished bronze. His species had conquered 17 star systems through military might alone. When he spoke, his voice boomed across the chamber. Captain Jin Wu, your species has been warned repeatedly to cease expansion into the Outer Veil systems. Those territories are claimed by the Vryn Empire, yet your colony ships continue to arrive. Your construction continues. Your defiance continues. Thralix leaned forward, his claws scraping against the table. We did not permit you to enter our space. Jin Wu sat quietly for a moment, then spoke in a voice that was surprisingly soft. The Outer Veil was unclaimed when we arrived. Your nearest outpost is 14 light-years away. You have no settlements there, no stations, no presence of any kind. We claimed it 3,000 years ago, another delegate shouted. This was Ambassador Krell of the Sistine Confederation, a being made of crystalline formations that glowed with inner light. Your species doesn't understand galactic law. Your children playing with toys you don't comprehend. Jin Wu's expression didn't change. We understand that empty space isn't owned by anyone until someone lives there. We're living there now. Thousands of families call those worlds home. Velthar watched the exchange with growing interest. The human wasn't backing down, but he wasn't being aggressive either. He simply stated facts, as if discussing the weather. The other delegates were getting angrier, but Jin Wu remained perfectly calm. Thralix slammed his fist on the table, cracking the surface. Then you force our hand. The Vryn Empire hereby issues an ultimatum. You have 30 days to evacuate all human presence from the Outer Veil systems. If you refuse, we will remove you by force. Our fleet is 10 times the size of yours. Our warriors have been bred for combat for millennia. Your species barely knows how to navigate between stars. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Jin Wu. This was the moment where the human should plead, should negotiate, should show fear. Every species in the room knew what war with the Vryn Empire meant. It meant extinction for smaller powers. Jin Wu stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket with careful, precise movements. When he looked at Thralix, his eyes were dark and unreadable. We will not abandon our colonies, he said simply. If you attack our people, we will defend them. That's all I have to say. Several delegates gasped. One laughed outright. Thralix's face twisted into what might have been a smile, though it looked more like a snarl. Then in 30 days, your species will learn what real warfare looks like, Thralix said. We will crush your pathetic fleet and occupy your worlds. Perhaps servitude will teach you respect. Jin Wu nodded once, as if Throlix had just told him about the weather forecast. 30 days. Understood. He turned and walked toward the exit. Velthar found himself standing. Captain, wait! The words came out before he could stop them. Jinwoo paused and looked back. Are you not afraid? The Vryn Empire has never lost a war. They have hundreds of warships, millions of soldiers. Your species is new to space. How can you possibly stand against them? For the first time, something flickered across Jinwoo's face. It might have been sadness or maybe weariness. Ambassador Velthar, isn't it? From the Kryn Collective? He walked back a few steps. Let me tell you something about humans. We've been fighting wars since before we had written language. We fought with sticks and stones. Then we fought with bronze and iron. Then we fought with gunpowder and machines. Then we fought with nuclear fire that could crack our planet open. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was quieter. We fought ourselves for thousands of years, Ambassador. We fought over land, over resources, over ideas and gods and things that don't matter anymore. We nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times. We learned every possible way to kill each other efficiently. And then, finally, we stopped fighting each other and reached for the stars, hoping we'd never have to use those skills again. Jinwoo looked around the room at all the assembled powers. We came out here hoping to find peace. We wanted to build, to create, to explore. We still want that. But if someone forces us to fight... He trailed off and shook his head. We know how to fight. We're very, very good at it. Better than you can imagine. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Throlix laughed, a harsh barking sound. Brave words from a species with barely 100 warships. We'll see how brave you are when our fleets darken your skies. Jinwoo nodded again and left without another word. The meeting dissolved after that. Delegates filed out, some talking excitedly about the coming war, others dismissing humanity as foolish and doomed. Velthar remained in his seat, thinking about the look in Jinwoo's eyes. It hadn't been fear or bravado. It had been something else. Something that made Velthar's antenna twitch with unease. The human had been sad. As if he already knew how this would end. As if he'd seen it all before. Velthar made a decision in that moment. He had to know more about these humans. He had to understand what made them so confident in the face of certain destruction. His curiosity was too strong to ignore, and besides, the Kryn Collective needed to know if humanity posed a threat or could become an ally. He would travel to human space. He would observe their preparations for war. And maybe, just maybe, he would understand why Jinwoo had looked so sad when talking about fighting. Outside the station, in the cold darkness, fleets were already beginning to move. The countdown had started. In 30 days, the galaxy would see what humans were capable of. Velthar just hoped he would survive to report what he learned. Velthar's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel above a world the humans called New Jeju. It was one of their outer colonies, a green planet with blue oceans that reminded him of the pictures he'd seen of Earth. This was one of the worlds that would face the Vryn invasion first. Velthar expected to find chaos, panic, desperate evacuations. Instead, what he saw made his antenna curl in confusion. The orbital space around New Jeju was busier than ever. Ships moved in organized patterns, ferrying materials up and down from the surface. Defense satellites were being deployed in careful grids. Everything moved with purpose and precision. There was no panic at all. Velthar had sent a request to observe the colony's preparations, and surprisingly, the humans had agreed immediately. They had nothing to hide, they said. A shuttle brought him down to the main settlement, a city of about 2 million humans spread across a coastal valley. As he stepped off the shuttle, he was met by a man in civilian clothes carrying a data tablet. Ambassador Velthar? I'm Dongwoo, chief engineer for the colony. Welcome to New Jeju. The man smiled and shook Velthar's hand with the strange human greeting. "I'll show you around. We're pretty busy right now, as you can imagine." They walked through the city, and Velthar watched in amazement as the entire place transformed before his eyes. Civilian buildings were being reinforced with concrete and metal. Parks were being dug up to create underground bunkers. Factories that had produced farming equipment were now stamping out weapons and ammunition. Every human seemed to have a job, a task, a purpose. "You're not evacuating?" Velthar asked. Dongwu looked at him strangely. "Evacuate where? This is our home. We built this city with our own hands. We're not leaving. But the Vryn fleet will be here in less than a month. They'll bombard you from orbit. You're civilians, not soldiers." Dongwu stopped walking and turned to face him. "Ambassador, every human is a civilian until they need to be something else. My grandfather fought in the unification wars on Earth. My mother was a combat engineer in the Mars Rebellion. I served 6 years in the Terran Engineering Corps before I came here to build homes. Now I'm going to build fortifications. It's all just engineering problems to solve." They entered a hospital where doctors and nurses were working frantically. Velthar noticed they weren't treating patients. They were preparing. Setting up emergency operating rooms, stockpiling blood and medical supplies, running drills for mass casualty events. A woman in a white coat noticed them and walked over. "Dongwu, we need more generators in the underground hospital. We'll lose power if the grid gets hit." She noticed Velthar and nodded politely. "Ambassador, I'm Hayrin, Chief Medical Officer." "You're preparing to treat wounded," Velthar said. "Lots of wounded." Hayrin's expression didn't change. "Yes, war means casualties. We'll be ready." She pulled out her tablet and showed him charts and projections. "Based on historical data from Earth's conflicts and estimated bombardment patterns, we're preparing for 30% civilian casualties in the first week if orbital defenses fail, higher if they breach the atmosphere. We have underground facilities that can handle up to 50,000 wounded simultaneously." Velthar felt sick. She was talking about the deaths of hundreds of thousands of her own people as if it were a math problem. "How can you be so calm?" Hayrin finally showed emotion, a flicker of something hard in her eyes. "Because panicking doesn't save lives, Ambassador. Preparation does. I've been a trauma surgeon for 15 years. I've seen what war does to bodies. The best thing I can do is be ready to put people back together." She paused. "We asked for peace. They chose war. So we prepare." Dongwu led him to the military base next. Here, Velthar met Commander Sujin, a woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to look straight through him. She wore combat armor marked with scars and burns from previous battles. Around her, soldiers trained with focused intensity. "Ambassador Velthar," Sujin said, her voice clipped and professional. "I hear you want to understand how we prepare for war." "Yes, Commander. I'm trying to understand how your people can be so calm when facing overwhelming odds." Sujin smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "Overwhelming odds are normal for humans, Ambassador. My unit fought on Titan against separatist forces that outnumbered us 8-1. We won because we were better trained, better equipped, and more willing to do what was necessary." She gestured to her soldiers. "Every human here knows that we might die. We've accepted that. But we also know that we'll take a lot of enemies with us." She led him to a view screen showing tactical displays. "The Vryn think they'll roll over us because they have more ships. They don't understand what they're facing. They've never fought a species that's been at war with itself for its entire history. They've conquered primitive worlds and fought weak neighbors. They've never fought someone who understands warfare like we do." Velthar watched the tactical displays showing defense grids, weapon placements, fallback positions. Everything was planned in detail. "You've been preparing for this even before the ultimatum, haven't you?" "We've been preparing for this since the day we left Earth," Sujin said. We hoped we'd never need to fight. But hope isn't a strategy. Every colony we build to defend. Every ship we launch, we design for war. Every citizen knows basic combat and survival skills. We learned on Earth that peace is built on the foundation of strength. As the sun set on New Jeju, Velthar found himself in a school that had been converted into an evacuation center. Children were being organized, not to flee off-world, but to move into underground shelters. Teachers calmly explained what would happen, what the children should do, how to stay safe. The children listened seriously, asking practical questions. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, approached Velthar. Her name was Mi-young, one of the teachers told him. She looked at him with curious eyes. "Excuse me, Ambassador. Are you here to help us?" "I'm here to observe, young one, to learn about your people." "Oh, have you ever been in a war?" The question caught him off guard. "No, my people have been at peace for over 1,000 years. Mi-young considered this. "That's nice. My dad says we used to fight each other on Earth all the time. Big wars where millions died, nuclear wars that almost destroyed everything. Then we figured out how to stop fighting each other and started exploring space instead." She paused. "I wish the Vryn had let us stay peaceful. Mom says sometimes you have to fight, even when you don't want to." Velthar felt a chill run through his body. This child was discussing nuclear war and mass death as calmly as she might discuss homework. And she was right. Her people had experience with warfare on a scale his species couldn't imagine. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times and survived. What was the Vryn threat compared to that? That night, Velthar sat in his quarters trying to process everything he'd seen. These humans weren't warriors who had learned to build civilizations. They were builders, farmers, doctors, engineers, teachers who had learned how to fight because they had to. And they were very, very good at it. He thought about the children in the shelter, calmly preparing for bombardment, the doctors planning for mass casualties, the engineers turning homes into fortresses, the soldiers who had already accepted they might die. Velthar realized something terrifying. The Vryn Empire was about to attack the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they had no idea what was coming. Velthar's journey took him to humanity's home system next. He had requested access to Earth's military facilities, expecting to be denied or shown only what humans wanted him to see. Instead, Admiral Yuna herself had invited him for a complete tour. "We want you to understand," she had said over the communication link. "We want at least one person in the galaxy to know what humanity is truly capable of." The Admiral met him at the lunar shipyards, a massive construction facility on humanity's moon. She was a woman in her 50s, with gray streaking her black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a crisp uniform covered in medals that Velthar didn't recognize, but suspected were earned in blood. "Welcome to Luna, Ambassador. I hope you're ready for a long tour." Velthar looked out the viewport at the construction bays and felt his breath catch. He had expected to see dozens of ships being built, maybe 100 at most. Instead, he saw thousands. Warships in various stages of construction filled the visible space, and Admiral Yuna's casual gesture suggested this was only one of many such facilities. "How many ships?" he managed to ask. "Currently under construction? About 4,000 in this system alone. We have similar facilities around Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Plus, the outer colonies are building their own defense fleets." She smiled at his shocked expression. "You look surprised." "The intelligence report said humanity had barely 300 warships. Those are frontline vessels, fully crewed and operational. These are the reserves, the reinforcements, the second wave." Admiral Yuna pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's entire military-industrial complex. "This is what we call total war doctrine, Ambassador. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource in human space can be converted to military production within 48 hours. We learned this the hard way on Earth during what we call the World Wars. She walked him through the facility, explaining the construction process. Humans had developed automation to an incredible degree. Ships were built in modules that could be assembled in days rather than months. Weapon systems were standardized so they could be mass-produced. Everything was designed for efficiency and speed. The Vryn think they can win a long war because they have more ships right now, Admiral Yuna said. They don't understand that we can outbuild them 10-1. Every week the war continues, we get stronger while they get weaker. It's mathematics. They took a shuttle to Mars next, and Velthar saw something that truly frightened him. Factories that stretched for kilometers across the Red Desert. Admiral Yuna explained that in peacetime, these facilities produced everything from farming equipment to personal electronics. But each factory was designed with war in mind. "Watch this," she said, pulling up a control interface. She entered a code, and across the facility, machinery began to shift and reorganize. This factory made civilian vehicles yesterday. Today it's making armored transports. Tomorrow it could be making ammunition. The day after, missiles. We can reshape our entire industrial base to fit whatever the war needs. A man in work clothes approached them. Admiral Yun-Ah introduced him as Hyun-Sik, a captain in special operations. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like someone's friendly uncle. But when he spoke, his voice carried weight. "Ambassador, the Admiral tells me you want to understand human warfare. Let me show you something." He led them to a secure facility underground, past multiple security checkpoints. Inside was a museum of sorts, but instead of art, it displayed weapons. Ancient and modern, primitive and sophisticated. Hyun-Sik pointed to different exhibits as they walked. Stone axes from 50,000 years ago. We used these to kill each other before we had metal. Bronze swords from 5,000 years ago. Guns from 500 years ago. Nuclear weapons from 200 years ago. He stopped at a display showing a missile. This one could destroy an entire city. We built thousands of them and pointed them at ourselves. We lived under the threat of total extinction for decades. "Why show me this?" Velthar asked, feeling sick. "Because you need to understand what humans are," Hyun-Sik said quietly. "We're not warriors who learn to build. We're builders who learn to destroy. We created agriculture, medicine, art, music, and literature. We also created weapons that could crack planets open. We're capable of incredible beauty and terrible violence, often at the same time." He pulled up files showing human conflicts throughout history. Velthar watched in horror as images flashed by. Battles involving millions of soldiers, cities reduced to rubble, weapons that killed with fire, poison, disease, and radiation. And through it all, humans kept fighting, kept surviving, kept finding new ways to wage war. "This is what the Vryn don't understand," Hyun-Sik continued. "They think warfare is about having bigger ships and more soldiers. They've never fought an enemy that was exactly as smart as they are. We have. For thousands of years, we fought opponents who were just as clever, just as determined, just as willing to die as we were. We fought ourselves. Every tactic we know because we had to defend against it first." Admiral Yuna took over the tour again, showing him tactical doctrine files. Velthar read through them with growing dread. Humans didn't just plan to fight battles. They planned to destroy entire economies, cripple industrial bases, break supply lines, and shatter morale. They had strategies for fighting in space, on planets, underground, in cities, in forests, in deserts. They had contingency plans for every possible scenario. "The Vryn will come expecting a traditional space battle," Admiral Yuna explained. "Ship against ship. May the bigger fleet win. But we don't fight traditional battles. We fight to win, which means we target everything that allows the enemy to wage war. Their shipyards, their factories, their supply depots, their command centers. By the time they realize what we're doing, it'll be too late. Velthar thought about the children he'd seen on New Jeju, calmly preparing for war. Why are you showing me all this? Why reveal your capabilities? Admiral Yuna was quiet for a moment. Because we want someone to understand. We don't want to be monsters, Ambassador. We came to the stars hoping to leave our violent past behind. But if we're forced to fight, we'll fight with everything we have. We want you to witness what's about to happen and tell the galaxy. Maybe next time, someone will think twice before starting a war with humanity. They stood in silence, looking out at the vast military infrastructure of Mars. Factories that could produce war materials faster than any other species in the galaxy. Ships being built by the thousands. Weapons designed from millennia of experience. And behind it all, billions of humans who had learned from painful history that survival sometimes required terrible things. Velthar finally understood why Captain Jin Woo had looked so sad at the conference. The humans didn't want this war. They had tried so hard to leave their violent past behind. But the galaxy had forced them to remember what they were capable of, and now everyone would see. The Vryn Empire has no idea what's coming, do they? Velthar said softly. No, Admiral Yun-Ah replied. They really don't. The invitation came 3 days later. Velthar was summoned to Terran High Command, deep beneath the surface of Earth in a bunker complex that could survive planetary bombardment. He was escorted through corridors filled with busy officers coordinating movements across dozens of star systems. The humans were methodical, efficient, and completely calm, despite being days away from war. General Tai Min waited for him in a conference room surrounded by holographic displays. The general was an older man with white hair and deep lines in his face. He looked tired, like someone who had carried heavy burdens for too long. When he shook Velthar's hand, his grip was firm, but not aggressive. Ambassador Velthar, Admiral Yun-Ah tells me you've been very interested in our preparations. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Velthar sat, and General Tai Min activated the main display. It showed the Vryn Empire's territory, their worlds marked in red, their fleet positions highlighted. We've been watching the Vryn for 20 years, the general said, mapping their systems, tracking their ships, understanding their infrastructure. We knew this day would come eventually. Someone would challenge us, test us, try to take what we built. So we prepared. He pressed a button and the display changed. Blue markers appeared throughout Vryn space, surrounding nearly every major world. These are our strike fleets. They've been positioning for the last 2 weeks, using stealth technology that makes them invisible to Vryn sensors. Right now, while the Vryn fleet masses at our border preparing to invade, we have forces behind their lines ready to strike. Velthar stared at the display in shock. You're not going to defend your colonies? Of course we'll defend them, General Tai Min said. But defense isn't how you win wars, Ambassador. You win by destroying the enemy's ability to fight. The Vryn fleet at our border represents about 60% of their total military strength. They think this show of force will intimidate us. Instead, they've left their home territory vulnerable. A woman entered the room carrying multiple data tablets. General Tai Min introduced her as Ji-Won, the director of Terran intelligence. She had sharp eyes and moved with quiet confidence. Without preamble, she began explaining the human battle plan. When the war begins, we will simultaneously strike 32 Vryn worlds, Ji-Won said, pulling up detailed intelligence on each target. We won't land troops. We won't invade. We'll bombard from orbit, targeting military installations, industrial facilities, power generation, and communication networks. Within 6 hours, the Vryn will lose 60% of their shipbuilding capacity, 80% of their weapons manufacturing, and all coordination between their scattered fleets. Velthar felt his antenna trembling. But there are civilians on those worlds, billions of them. Yes, Jiwan said, her voice neutral. We've calculated civilian casualties between 800 million and 1.2 billion in the first week, depending on how quickly they surrender. That's genocide. Velthar stood up, his voice rising. You're planning to murder billions of civilians. General Taemin's expression didn't change. We're planning to end a war as quickly as possible with minimum human casualties. The Vryn chose to threaten our families, our children, our homes. They could have left us alone. They could have negotiated. Instead, they issued an ultimatum backed by military force. So we will respond with military force. But the civilians are innocent. Are they? The general's voice was cold now. They support their government. They pay taxes that build warships. They elect leaders who choose conquest. They benefit from the territories their empire has seized from weaker species. The Vryn Empire didn't build itself. Every citizen shares responsibility. He pulled up historical files from Earth. Let me show you something, Ambassador. This is a city called Dresden. During what we called World War II, it was bombed for 3 days straight. 30,000 civilians died. This is Hiroshima. One nuclear weapon killed 80,000 instantly. This is Nanking, where an invading army killed 300,000 civilians. This is Stalingrad, where over 1 million died in a single battle. The images kept coming. Cities in ruins, bodies in streets, devastation beyond anything Velthar could imagine. We did this to ourselves, Ambassador. For 100 years, we fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own species. We learned that total war means targeting everything, not just armies. We learned that breaking a nation's will to fight is more important than destroying its military. We learned these lessons in our own blood. Velthar sat back down, feeling sick. How can you be so calm about this? Because we have to be, Jiwan answered. Emotion doesn't help in war. Planning does. Strategy does. The willingness to do terrible things for survival does. She pulled up more data. We've run thousands of simulations. If we fight a traditional war, ship to ship, planet to planet, it will last years. Millions will die on both sides. Our colonies will be devastated. The Vryn will fight to the last because they don't know how to surrender. But our way ends it in weeks, General Taemin continued. We demonstrate overwhelming force immediately. We show them they can't win, that continuing the war will only bring more destruction. We give them a choice: surrender now and rebuild later, or fight and lose everything. It's the most humane option. Humane? Velthar's voice cracked. You just described killing 1 billion civilians. The general's face finally showed emotion. Pain, regret, and something that might have been guilt. Yes, and I'll carry the weight of that decision for the rest of my life. Every officer in this room will. But we'll do it anyway, because our job is to protect humanity, not to have clean consciences. The Vryn forced this choice on us. We didn't want war, but now that it's here, we'll fight it the only way we know how. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth spinning peacefully in space. My grandfather fought in the last great war on Earth. He watched his friends die in mud and blood. When it was over, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said war is hell, but it's a necessary hell sometimes. The key is to make it so terrible, so complete, so devastating, that nobody ever wants to do it again. Velthar thought about everything he'd seen. The children preparing for bombardment, the factories that could outproduce any other species, the soldiers who accepted they might die, the admirals planning strikes across dozens of worlds, and now this, a willingness to kill billions if necessary. Why are you telling me all this? He asked quietly. Because we want one person to understand, G1 said. One person who can tell the galaxy what happened here and why. We don't enjoy this, Ambassador. We're not monsters. We're just very, very good at survival. And we learned a long time ago that sometimes survival requires doing monstrous things. General Tae-min returned to his seat. In a few days, the Vryn will attack our border colonies, and we will respond with everything we have. History will judge us for what we're about to do, but our children will be alive to read about it, and that's what matters. Velthar left the command center in a daze. He had come seeking to understand humanity. Now he understood, and he wished he didn't. They weren't evil. They weren't cruel. They were just incredibly, terrifyingly practical about survival, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. Velthar rushed back to the diplomatic station where everything had begun. He had sent urgent messages to the Council requesting an emergency session. The galaxy needed to know what he had learned. The Vryn needed to be stopped before they made a terrible mistake. He arrived with 15 days left before the ultimatum expired. The council chamber was full again, all 12 empires represented. High Commander Thralix stood at the center, looking triumphant. Ambassador Velthar returns from his spy mission. Tell me, did the humans beg you to plead for mercy on their behalf? I came to warn you, Velthar said, his voice urgent. I've seen their preparations. I've toured their facilities. I've spoken with their commanders. The Vryn Empire must withdraw the ultimatum immediately. You don't understand what you're facing. Thralix laughed, and several other delegates joined in. We face a primitive species with delusions of grandeur. Our fleet is assembled and ready. In 15 days we will crush them. They have thousands of ships, Velthar insisted. Their industrial capacity is beyond anything in the galaxy. They've planned for this war down to the smallest detail. They'll destroy you. Propaganda, Ambassador Krell said dismissively. The humans showed you what they wanted you to see. They're trying to frighten us into backing down. Velthar wanted to scream in frustration. They wouldn't listen. They couldn't imagine that a young species could threaten ancient empires. Their pride blinded them to the truth. The chamber doors opened, and Captain Jinwoo entered, followed by Admiral Yun-Ah and General Tae-min. The three humans walked calmly to the center of the room, seemingly unafraid despite being surrounded by their enemies. We've come to offer one final chance for peace, Jinwoo said quietly. Withdraw your ultimatum. Leave our colonies alone. We can coexist peacefully. Thralix stepped toward them threateningly. Your time for negotiation is over. We gave you 30 days. You refused to comply. Now you will face the consequences. Admiral Yuna pulled out a data device and projected coordinates and timestamps into the air. These are the current positions of our strike fleets. Right now, we have forces surrounding 32 Vryn worlds. We're showing you this as a courtesy. You still have time to choose peace. Thralix studied the data and then laughed again. More propaganda. You expect us to believe you have ships positioned throughout our territory? Our sensors would have detected them. You're bluffing. We're not, General Tae-min said flatly. But you'll find out soon enough. Thralix's face twisted with rage. Enough of this! I tire of your lies and arrogance. He turned to his communication officer. Order the fleet to attack human border stations immediately. We're done waiting. Jinwoo's expression didn't change. So be it. The three humans turned and left the chamber. Velthar tried to follow them, but the doors sealed. Inside the chamber, celebration broke out. The Vryn delegates were congratulating each other, certain of victory. Velthar sat in his chair, feeling numb. He had tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen. An hour later, the first reports came in. Velthar watched on the council chamber's displays as events unfolded in real time. The Vryn fleet had indeed attacked human border stations, destroying 3 small outposts. But before they could celebrate their easy victory, Something else happened. All across Vryn space, human ships appeared as if from nowhere. They had been there all along, hidden by stealth technology the Vryn didn't know existed. In perfect coordination, they struck simultaneously. Orbital shipyards around the Vryn homeworld exploded in silent flashes. Weapons factories on the industrial world of Vrix Prime went dark as railgun strikes destroyed their power generators. Communication satellites were systematically eliminated. Military bases were hit with precision munitions that left surrounding areas intact, but destroyed every weapon, every vehicle, every ammunition depot. The attacks lasted 6 hours. Then the human fleets vanished again, disappearing before Vryn defenses could even organize a response. In those 6 hours, the Vryn Empire lost more military and industrial capacity than they had in 1,000 years of conquest. The council chamber was silent, everyone staring at the reports in shock. The humans had been telling the truth. They really had positioned forces throughout Vryn space. They really could strike anywhere at any time, and they had done it with terrifying precision. "Surely this is a temporary setback," Thralik said, but his voice was shaken. "We still have our fleet. We can still crush their colonies." Then another message came through. This one was broadcast across every communication channel in Vryn space, civilian and military. A young human woman appeared on screen, her face calm and professional. She wore a military uniform with a name tag that read, Yun-Hee. "Citizens of the Vryn Empire. This is Communications Officer Yun-Hee of the Terran Defense Fleet. Today your government chose war. In response, we have disabled 60% of your military infrastructure. Your shipyards cannot build new vessels. Your factories cannot produce weapons. Your economy will collapse within weeks without these facilities." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We are now offering you a choice. Your government can surrender immediately, accept peace terms, and begin rebuilding. Or we will continue our campaign. Every day you resist, we will destroy more infrastructure. Your worlds will lose power, water, food distribution. Eventually, billions will die not from our weapons, but from the collapse of your civilization." Her face remained calm, but her words were ice. "We did not want this war. Your leaders forced it upon us. But now that it has begun, we will prosecute it with absolute commitment. You have 72 hours to surrender. After that, we will render your 3 most populous worlds uninhabitable as a demonstration. Choose wisely." The message ended. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates were shouting, arguing, some demanding action while others called for restraint. Thralik stood frozen, staring at the display where casualty reports kept climbing. Not from civilian deaths, but from the sudden collapse of infrastructure, power outages, transportation failures, supply chain disruptions. The humans had attacked the foundations of Vryn civilization itself. Velthar found Jinwoo standing outside the chamber, looking out at the stars. "You knew this would happen," Velthar said. "You knew they'd attack and you were ready." "We've been ready since the day we left Earth," Jinwoo replied quietly. "We hoped we'd never need to use these capabilities. We built them as insurance, as deterrent. But the galaxy forced our hand." "How long until they surrender?" 3 days at most, maybe sooner. Once their civilians realize their government started a war that's destroying their comfortable lives, they'll demand peace. The Vryn have never experienced real hardship. They'll break quickly. Velthar thought about everything he'd witnessed. No human soldiers died. You won without a single casualty. Jinwoo nodded slowly. That was the goal. Minimum human losses, maximum enemy disruption. We learned on Earth that the best victories are the ones where you don't have to fight at all. You just make the cost of fighting too high for the enemy to bear. And now? Now the galaxy knows what humanity is capable of. Maybe next time someone considers attacking us, they'll remember what happened to the Vryn. Maybe we can finally have the peace we came out here seeking. Velthar watched him walk away, this quiet man who represented the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He thought about the children on New Jeju who might never face bombardment now, the soldiers who wouldn't die in battle, the colonies that would continue building and growing in peace. 3 days later, the Vryn Empire formally surrendered. The war had lasted less than a week. No human soldier had died. The Vryn had lost billions in infrastructure, but relatively few lives. It would take them decades to rebuild, but they would survive. Velthar filed his final report to the Kryn Collective. His recommendation was simple. Maintain friendly relations with humanity at all costs. They do not desire conquest or dominance. They only want to build, explore, and create. But if threatened, they possess the capability and will to destroy any opponent completely and efficiently. They are not warriors who learned civilization. They are civilized beings who mastered warfare through necessity. The distinction is everything. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity had come to the stars seeking peace, and they had proven, beyond any doubt, that they would have that peace one way or another.